He was kneeling on the hot asphalt, hands clutching his head, a silent scream tearing through his throat. In front of him, the imposing red Carlman King, a car worth more than many houses, was dented in the front, a brutal sign of what had just happened. But it wasn't the luxury car, the symbol of his fortune, that made him cry. It was the inert, furry body stretched out on the ground, the only creature that truly loved him, the only one that made him feel less alone in his gigantic mansion. That bark that greeted him every day, the wagging tail, the eyes full of unconditional affection, now silenced. How had Richard, a man who had everything money could buy, reached this point of despair? How could life, which seemed so perfect on the outside, be so cruel on the inside? The image of his dog, his faithful companion, there, lifeless, was a mirror of his own soul, now shattered and empty. The silence that followed the impact was deafening, a silence that promised an even greater loneliness than he already knew. If you're feeling this emotion with us, please subscribe to the channel and comment from which city you are watching this story. It's very important for us to know how far this story is reaching. Richard, a 45-year-old man, was the kind of person who, to the outside world, had the perfect life. He lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, a city known for its grand mansions and wealthy residents. Its tree-lined streets were a stage for parades of luxury cars like Porsches, Ferraris, and Lamborghinis, and its stores displayed windows with Tiffany & Co's jewelry and Prada and Louis Vuitton designer clothes. Richard was part of this scene, a tech entrepreneur who had built an empire from scratch. His fortune was measured in billions, and his investments in stocks and high-end real estate ensured that money was never a problem. He owned a mansion with more than 10 bedrooms, an Olympic-sized pool, a tennis court, and a private helipad. His days were filled with business meetings on Wall Street, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, and trips on his private jet to exotic destinations. However, behind all this opulence, there was an emptiness. Richard was a lonely man. His wife had left him years ago, taking with her the joy and vibrancy that once filled the house. His children, already adults, lived their own lives in other cities, and visits were rare and formal. Friends? He had many acquaintances, people who surrounded him out of interest, but no true friends, no one with whom he could share his fears and joys without masks. The only creature that made him feel truly loved and understood was his dog, a Tibetan mastiff named Bartholomew, 8 years old. Bartholomew was more than a pet. He was his shadow, his confidant, the only constant presence in his life. The dog followed him throughout the house, lay at his feet while he worked in his office, and greeted him at the door with contagious euphoria whenever he returned home. That hoarse bark and wagging tail were the only sounds that broke the oppressive silence of the mansion. Richard spent fortunes on Bartholomew, from special imported food to expensive toys and regular visits to the best veterinarians in the region. The dog was his greatest treasure, an invaluable asset that no money could buy. He remembered how he had found Bartholomew, still a puppy, in an animal shelter. At that time, Richard was at the peak of his career, but he felt an emptiness that not even financial success could fill. Bartholomew had filled that void with his pure and unconditional love. That's why the scene before him, Bartholomew's inert body on the asphalt, was so devastating. The accident had been a silly oversight, a moment of distraction. Richard was leaving his garage in a hurry for an important meeting and didn't see Bartholomew, who had lain down behind the car, as he often did on sunny days. The impact was light, but enough to cause the damage. The sound of the tire passing over the dog's body echoed in his mind like thunder. He braked sharply, his heart pounding, and got out of the car, terrified of what he would find. And there was Bartholomew, his eyes once so full of life, now dull. Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The world, which once seemed so solid and secure, crumbled in an instant. That luxury car, the Kalman King, which he had bought for millions of dollars, now seemed like a monster, an instrument of his own misfortune. Money, which had always been his greatest tool, was useless now. There was no check, no bank transfer, no investment that could bring Bartholomew back. The wealth he so cherished suddenly seemed empty and meaningless. The loneliness he tried to ward off with material possessions and professional achievements now embraced him with overwhelming force. He was there, in the middle of the street of his mansion, a billionaire, but completely broken. News of the accident spread quickly through the small, exclusive community of Greenwich. Not because of the dog's death, but because of the shock of seeing Richard, the tech magnate, so vulnerable. Neighbors, accustomed to seeing him always impeccable and unshakable, now watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Some offered words of comfort, others just watched from afar, whispering about the irony of fate. Richard, however, was oblivious to everything. His mind was in a whirlwind of guilt and regret. He refused to leave Bartholomew. He spent hours there on the asphalt, hugging the dog's body, as if he could, with the warmth of his own body, bring life back. Tears flowed freely, wetting Bartholomew's fur, mixing with the blood that stained the ground. The pain was physical, a sharp pang in his chest that prevented him from breathing. He remembered every moment he had spent with Bartholomew, the walks in the park, the games in the garden, the nights when the dog slept at his feet, protecting him from a loneliness he could barely admit. Every memory was a stab, a reminder of what he had lost. The mansion, once a refuge, now seemed like a prison. Every room, every object, every corner of the house brought back memories of Bartholomew. The empty food bowl in the kitchen, the toys scattered around the living room, the empty bed next to his bed. Everything was a constant reminder of the absence. Richard tried to fill the void. He bought more luxury cars, a new Rolls-Royce Phantom, a Bugatti Chiron, as if acquiring material possessions could erase the pain. He invested in very expensive works of art, paintings by renowned artists, marble sculptures, filling the walls and empty spaces of the mansion. He hired private chefs, security guards, gardeners, a team of employees to fill the silence. But nothing worked. The emptiness persisted, deeper and more painful than ever. Money, which was once the solution to all his problems, was now the cause of his greatest misery. He had everything, but he didn't have what mattered most: Bartholomew's companionship. The nights were the worst. The silence of the mansion was deafening. Richard spent hours awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving the accident in his mind. He blamed himself, tormented himself, wondered why he hadn't been more careful, why he hadn't paid more attention. Guilt gnawed at him from within, turning him into a shadow of the man he once was. His businesses began to suffer. He lost interest in everything, in meetings, in investments, in new technologies. His fortune, once constantly growing, began to stagnate. Employees noticed the change, the sadness in his eyes, the lack of enthusiasm. Richard's life, which was once an example of success, was now a portrait of desolation. He isolated himself even further, refusing invitations to social events, avoiding contact with the few people who still cared about him. Loneliness, which was once an unwanted companion, was now his only friend. He sank into a routine of self-pity, living in a world of regret and pain. The luxury that surrounded him was just a reminder of his wealth, but not of his happiness. He wondered if he would ever be able to overcome the loss of Bartholomew, if he would ever be able to find a new purpose for his life. The answer seemed distant, lost amidst the darkness that enveloped him. Richard's life became a vicious cycle of regret and isolation. He spent his days wandering through the mansion, a ghost in his own home. Meals were solitary, car rides aimless, nights sleepless. The Kalman King, the car that had been the instrument of his tragedy, remained in the garage, untouched, a constant reminder of his guilt. He could no longer drive. The image of Bartholomew on the asphalt haunted him at every turn. His other luxury cars, once a source of pride, were now just empty symbols of a life he could no longer enjoy. Money, which was once his greatest achievement, was now a burden. He had so much, but he didn't have what mattered most: peace of mind. One day, while flipping through an old photo album, Richard found a picture of Bartholomew as a puppy, sleeping in his arms. A solitary tear rolled down his face. At that moment, he realized he couldn't continue living that way. The pain was unbearable, but the loneliness was even worse. He needed to find a way to honor Bartholomew's memory, to turn his pain into something meaningful. Richard began researching animal shelters, organizations that rescued abandoned dogs. He discovered that there were many Bartholomews out there, dogs that needed a home, love, and a second chance. The idea of helping these animals lit a small flame in his heart, a flame he thought had been extinguished forever. He decided to use his fortune to make a difference. He started by donating large sums of money to animal shelters across the country. Then he went further. He bought a huge plot of land on the outskirts of Greenwich and began building a sanctuary for abandoned dogs, a place where they could live with dignity, receive care, and find loving families. He named the sanctuary Bartholomew's Home, in honor of his faithful companion. Richard dedicated himself body and soul to the project. He supervised every detail of the construction, from the choice of materials to the design of the kennels. He hired veterinarians, trainers, and caregivers, people who shared his passion for animals. For the first time in a long time, Richard felt a purpose. The work at the sanctuary pulled him out of isolation. He spent hours with the dogs, playing, feeding them, giving them affection. Gradually, the sadness in his eyes gave way to a glimmer of hope. He still missed Bartholomew, but the pain was no longer paralyzing. He was transforming his pain into love, his guilt into compassion. The sanctuary became a success. Dogs of all breeds and sizes found a home at Bartholomew's Home. Stories of rescue and adoption spread, inspiring others to help abandoned animals. Richard, the lonely billionaire, had found his true wealth, the ability to make a difference in the lives of other beings. He still lived in his mansion, but now it didn't seem so empty. Every day, he received news from the sanctuary, photos of happy dogs in their new homes, messages of gratitude from families who had found a new member. The loneliness, which once consumed him, had been replaced by a sense of community and purpose. Richard's life, which seemed to have ended on that fateful day, had been reborn, richer and more meaningful than ever. He learned that true value is not in money or material possessions, but in love, compassion, and the ability to turn pain into something good. The story of Richard and Bartholomew makes us think, what truly matters in life? Does the pursuit of money and material possessions distance us from what is essential? Have you ever experienced a loss that made you rethink your values? Share your experience in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. Your subscription helps us continue telling these narratives that inspire and transform. What part of the story moved you the most? Do you believe Richard found true happiness by helping animals? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you think.